You're a hunter-gatherer. 13,000 years ago. No supermarkets, no refrigerators, no one delivering food to your door. You live in a cave, in what will one day become Israel, surrounded by people you actually like. Which, let's be honest, is rarer than we'd care to admit, even today. You've been walking all day. Your feet hurt. And the only thing about your situation that could honestly be called an improvement over modern life is that you have no concept of shoes that cost more than $100. And then one day, someone in your group finds some grain that's been sitting in a wet stone mortar for a little too long. It smells weird. It looks bubbly. Something has clearly happened to it. Something biological. Something mysterious. And for reasons that defy all logic and every survival instinct a sensible primate should have developed, someone decides to drink it anyway. That person, possibly the most important human being who ever lived. Because that accident, that single moment of extraordinary, reckless, magnificent curiosity may have set humanity on a path that changed everything. Not just parties. Not just the wine ants at Christmas dinner who start crying about their feelings after the second glass. Everything. Civilization, agriculture, religion, writing, the entire architecture of human social life as we know it. So, when exactly did ancient humans first drink alcohol? And more importantly, why did we even start? Buckle up, because the answer goes much, much further back than you think. And it doesn't start with humans at all. It starts with monkeys. Let's start with a question that sounds ridiculous on the surface, but is actually one of the most important we can ask. Were humans biologically designed to handle alcohol in the first place? Most animals, when they consume ethanol in any meaningful quantity, basically fall over and die, or at minimum have a deeply unpleasant time. Their bodies can't process it. Their livers stage an immediate protest. But humans and our close primate relatives, we're different. We carry a specific enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase 4, or ADH4, that lets us break down ethanol with surprising efficiency. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. That enzyme didn't appear when humans invented wine. It didn't appear when agriculture began. It appeared roughly 10 million years ago, before Homo sapiens, before Homo erectus, before basically anything we'd recognize as a human being was walking around on this planet. The mutation emerged deep in the primate family tree, right when our ancestors were transitioning from living in trees to spending more time on the ground. For 10 million years, long before we ever consciously chose to drink, our bodies were already preparing for the relationship. A biologist at UC Berkeley named Robert Dudley spent 25 years trying to figure out why. And the theory he developed has the greatest name in the history of science. He calls it the Drunken Monkey Hypothesis. The idea is elegant. Our ancient primate ancestors ate fruit, enormous quantities of fruit. And when fruit gets truly perfectly ripe, it begins to ferment. Yeasts in the environment land on the surface, eat the sugars, and produce ethanol as a byproduct. And here's the key insight. The smell of ethanol wasn't a warning sign. It was a beacon. It said, "This fruit is at maximum ripeness, maximum sweetness, maximum caloric value. Eat it now, before it's gone." The ancestors who ignored that fermented smell missed out on easy calories. The ones who followed the smell, who felt a pull toward it, got more food, lived longer, had more children, and passed that preference down the line. We were literally selected by evolution to enjoy the smell of booze. This isn't a character flaw. It isn't weakness. It's 10 million years of adaptation, working exactly as designed. You literally cannot blame yourself. And this isn't just theory. It's been tested. Researchers in Panama studied wild spider monkeys. The fruit those monkeys preferred consistently contained 1 to 2% alcohol by volume, and urine samples confirmed the monkeys were actively metabolizing it. A parallel study of chimpanzees in the Ivory Coast found their normal daily fruit diet could expose them to the equivalent of 1 to 2 full human drinks every single day, without making any choice, just by eating. So your ancient ancestor was technically getting a mild buzz in the forest 10 million years ago and had absolutely no idea. Okay, so we've established that primates have been accidentally consuming fermented fruit for millions of years, but at some point, the story changes. At some point, an actual cognitively modern human decides not to stumble upon fermented food accidentally, but to deliberately make it. This is a different, enormous leap. It requires observation, memory, the ability to notice. Something happened to this grain last time it got wet. Let's reproduce it. It requires, in other words, something that looks a lot like science. The oldest confirmed evidence of deliberate human alcohol production sits inside a cave in Israel, Rakafet Cave, near modern-day Haifa, a burial site used by a people called the Natufians, semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers who lived in the eastern Mediterranean between 15,000 and 11,500 years ago. These were smart, socially complex people. They buried their dead with flowers. They kept dogs as companions. The earliest evidence of dog domestication is associated with Natufian culture. They were not primitive in any meaningful sense. And inside their burial cave, archaeologists found large stone mortars still holding residue after 13,000 years. When a team led by Stanford archaeologist Li Liu analyzed that residue, the picture was unambiguous. They had been making beer, not wine, not some vague fermented liquid. Beer, from wheat and barley, produced through a 3-stage process: malting, mashing, fermenting. An intentional, multi-step, technically sophisticated process, 13,000 years ago. And now, here's the part that should make your brain quietly short-circuit. This predates agriculture. The Natufians were not farmers. They did not grow crops. They gathered wild grain from the landscape around them, and instead of eating all of it, they used some to make beer, deliberately, ritually, for their dead. This single fact has fueled one of the most fascinating debates in all of archaeology. Did humans first settle down and farm because they wanted reliable grain for bread, or because they wanted reliable grain for beer? The beer before bread hypothesis, championed most famously by archaeologist Brian Hayden, argues that the desire to produce fermented grain beverages reliably may have been one of the primary motivations behind the agricultural revolution. Think about it from first principles. Why would a hunter-gatherer, living a reasonably successful life by moving with the seasons, suddenly decide to stay in one place, break up the ground, plant seeds and wait months for them to grow. What would make that trade-off worthwhile? Beer. A guaranteed supply of beer. This connects directly to a broader theory explored by researchers like Edward Slingerland, who argues the desire to make beer and wine may have been a serious motivator for the development of agriculture itself. The oldest intentional alcohol production on Earth was not made by farmers, not by city builders, not by people we usually associate with civilization. It was made by nomadic cave dwellers, in the context of burying their dead. From the very beginning, alcohol was never just about having a good time. It was sacred. Now let's keep moving, because after the Natufians, the record fills up fast, and from multiple directions at once. Jump roughly 4,000 years forward. Around 7,000 BCE, we arrive at Jiahu, a Neolithic village in China's Yellow River Valley. Researchers led by molecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern of the University of Pennsylvania analyzed residues inside early pottery jars. What they found was remarkable. A mixed fermented beverage combining rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit, possibly grape. 9,000 years old. An ancient cocktail. Around the same period in modern-day Georgia, archaeologists found evidence of wine production going back roughly 8,000 years. Large clay storage jars, still bearing the chemical signatures of grape fermentation. This is currently the oldest confirmed wine in the world. Georgia still makes wine the traditional way, in large clay vessels called crave, buried in the earth. And Georgians will tell you, with complete justification, that they invented wine. There is truly no arguing with them, and there is no reason to try. Meanwhile, back at Jiahu, researchers also discovered the earliest known evidence of mold-based fermentation starters, a technique using specific fungi to break down complex starches in grain. This technique is the direct ancestor of the processes used today to make sake, baijiu, makgeolli, and dozens of other East Asian fermented drinks. 9,000 years of continuous tradition, running unbroken from a Neolithic pottery vessel to a glass on a table in Tokyo tonight. These cultures, China, Georgia, the Eastern Mediterranean, were not in contact with each other. They each discovered fermentation independently, within roughly the same window. Fermentation is not a lucky accident that happened once and spread. It is something humans, given grain, fruit, or honey, and enough time and curiosity, will discover on their own, every time. We are, as a species, fundamentally and incurably fermentation curious. Now let's talk about the civilization that turned alcohol from a discovery into a full bureaucratic system. Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians. The place where writing was invented, and where, perhaps not coincidentally, some of the very first things written down were records about beer. Archaeological evidence from Godin Tepe in western Iran places beer production in the Mesopotamian region as early as 3,500 BCE, confirmed by chemical residue inside ancient clay vessels. But Mesopotamia didn't just drink. Mesopotamia organized drinking into a social and economic institution. Sumerian workers received daily rations of beer as a fundamental part of their compensation. This wasn't casual generosity. It was the system. If you were a laborer building a temple, a scribe copying tablets, a farmer clearing channels, you received beer. Detailed administrative tablets survive that record these distributions with the same precision a modern accountant brings to payroll. Workers of average rank received about 2 liters of beer per day. Senior officials got more, and the dead were buried with beer too. Because the Sumerians saw no reason death should interrupt a reasonable daily ration, the Sumerians loved beer so deeply, so reverently, that they created an entire goddess to embody it. Her name was Ninkasi, which translates magnificently as the lady who fills the mouth. Around 1800 BCE, an anonymous Sumerian poet composed a hymn in her honor. The Hymn to Ninkasi. It's a religious poem, a declaration of love, and, embedded within its verses, something remarkably close to a step-by-step brewing recipe. The process is described in enough detail that in 1989, a modern American brewer named Fritz Maytag, founder of Anchor Brewing, actually attempted to recreate it. The result was served at a microbrewers meeting. Attendees drank it from clay jugs, through long straws, as the Sumerians had. The alcohol content, around 3.5%. The taste, reportedly reminiscent of champagne mixed with dates. 3,800 years after that hymn was written, it still worked. The Babylonians, inheriting Sumerian culture, took it further. They documented at least 70 varieties of beer, light, dark, filtered, spiced, regional, an entire taxonomy of fermented beverages. And then, this is the detail that genuinely makes me laugh every time. The Code of Hammurabi, dating to roughly 1754 BCE, includes specific legislation about beer, about minimum quality standards, about proper pricing, about what happens to a tavern owner caught watering down their product. If you watered down your beer in ancient Babylon, you were thrown into the river. Humanity's first great written legal code included consumer protection law for alcohol quality. We have, as a species, always known what matters. Egypt deserves its own chapter, because the Egyptians were doing something slightly different, and in many ways more interesting. The workers who built the pyramids, and let's be clear, not slaves, as decades of research have established, received regular rations of beer and bread as the foundation of their diet and pay. Egyptian beer, made primarily from emmer wheat, was thick, nutritious, and low in alcohol. In a climate where Nile water could carry pathogens, fermented beverages were genuinely safer to drink. Beer was, in a very real sense, public health infrastructure. Wine, on the other hand, was prestige. It was for the elite, for ceremony, for offerings to the gods, for the burial chambers of pharaohs. When archaeologists excavate royal Egyptian tombs, they find wine jars, sealed and labeled. Labeled not just with the vintage year, but with the vineyard of origin and sometimes the name of the chief vintner. The world's oldest wine labels. Sitting in tombs sealed for 3,000 years, the Egyptians attributed the gift of beer to Osiris, god of the dead, of resurrection, of the eternal cycle of renewal. Not as a curse, as a civilization-building gift, a pillar of being human. And here's the thread running through all of this. From the Natufians to Sumer to Egypt to ancient China, in virtually every culture, in every archaeological context where we find the earliest evidence of alcohol, it is tied to ritual, to the sacred, to death and burial, to offerings and prayers. to the transition between the world of the living and whatever comes after. The Natufians brewed beer in a burial cave to honor their dead. The Sumerians dedicated a goddess to brewing. The Egyptians offered wine to Osiris. Ancient Chinese burial sites from 9,000 years ago contain pottery vessels of beer made for the deceased. There's even more recent research, including work continuing in Patrick McGovern's lab, suggesting that some ancient ritual beverages were actually fortified with botanical additives, possibly including psychoactive plants. Because in the absence of distillation, ancient cultures enhanced their drinks however they could to amplify the effect. Humans didn't invent alcohol as a way to forget their problems after a long day of prehistoric agriculture. They invented it, or rather discovered and cultivated it, as a way of marking the moments that matter most: birth, death, harvest, prayer, the turning of seasons, the binding of communities. So, when did ancient humans first drink alcohol? The complete answer spans an almost incomprehensible range of time. The biological foundation, the genetic machinery that lets us metabolize ethanol, the enzymatic preference that makes us seek it out, was laid 10 million years ago. In the primate ancestors we share with every living ape and monkey on Earth. The first intentional production, 13,000 years ago, confirmed in a cave in Israel by hunter-gatherers who brewed beer as an act of devotion to their dead. The spread across civilizations, independently and simultaneously, in China, Georgia, Iran, Mesopotamia, Egypt. From there, the trajectory is well documented. Beer rations in Sumer, wine in Egypt's royal tombs, hymns to brewing goddesses, law codes protecting tavern pours, an unbroken chain of fermentation knowledge connecting a Neolithic pottery vessel to every bar, brewery, and kitchen in the world today. The next time someone passes you a drink, take a moment to appreciate the full weight of what you're holding. That glass is connected through an uninterrupted chain of human curiosity, ritual, survival, and community, all the way back to a hunter-gatherer standing in a cave 13,000 years ago, tasting something strange and uncertain, and finding it, against all reasonable expectations, good. And behind that, another 10 million years of monkeys in the forest, following the smell of something sweet and slightly wrong, and deciding every time to go toward it. Humanity didn't stumble into alcohol by accident. We grew toward it, the way a plant grows toward light. All right, I'm off now. I'm gonna get completely drunk. In the meantime, click on the next video. Bro, please, just click. See you soon.